tournament shows its head again.
Yeah, obviously, you kind of have to root a little bit against the Reanimator deck at this point. It's a little too successful for its own good. Yeah. I don't think it's performing significantly better than Jund across the Open Series, but it's winning a lot more trophies, which, you know, I resent.
Yeah, it's being played a lot more. Both players keeping on 7. We see Phillip Robinson starting off on a Godless Shrine, Zach Krizan on a Blood Crypt. Sorry, Krizan actually mulliganed to 6 this game.
Yep, we can see that as he displays his hand right there.
And Phillip's going to start the turn with a Mulch. So Robinson's deck, interestingly enough, we've been talking about whether some decks are playing Sin Collectors, some not playing Sin Collectors. He's opted not to play any of the Sin Collector package.
It's pretty interesting. There's actually a fair number of blue, white, red, and weirdo control decks. I guess there's no really other word for it in the metagame here, but they're definitely starting to like drop off as you get up to the upper table. So that decision's probably paying off for him now.
Yeah, Mulch finds Robinson a land. It also bins a Thragtusk for him.
Zach takes a shock for Blood Artist. Blood Artist is real nice in the Reanimator matchup because the opponent has very few ways to like actively or effectively remove it, and it can deal a ton of damage when you set up a Blasphemous Act, which is one of the best cards against Reanimator.
So in this matchup, would you say that like, does the Aristocrats deck want to be aggressive, or is it or is it going to win if we go long enough?
I think, you know, it's weird. It actually has the capability of doing both, but the burden is on the Aristocrat player to deal damage early, as he wants to try and get his opponent down to 13 or so life, and then he'll be able to, you know, close it out with a Blasphemous Act or whatever. He can also play sort of a combo game, though, where he's not really pressuring an onboard advantage or trying to deal a lot of damage. You know, he just squeaks in for a point here or there and pulls off a combo finish.
Well, Robinson Gristly salvages main phase. Before his land drop, he hits 4 lands and a Restoration Angel, opts to keep Sun Petal Grove, and is going to play another Temple Garden into play tapped.
So, you know, nothing really coming together for Phillip, nothing too scary. So Zach, you know, having plenty of time to draw to that mulligan.
Right, he's had a lot of chances to dump something into the graveyard, and really is kind of bricked on doing that.
Yeah, it looks like he kept one of those speculative hands that Reanimator tends to, you know, keep and just see what it can do. Those hands are actually, you know, a little weaker against the Aristocrats, which has a fairly respectable aggressive game thanks to Falcon Wrath Aristocrat.
Right, and now we see a second Blood Artist from Zach Krizan.
He's going to be hoping that Phillip is not one of those savvy players with Sever the Bloodlines.
That was just what I was thinking here. He does have one in the deck
I see. Yeah, he has one more in the sideboard, but, you know, it's game one. Zach probably feels relatively safe here, and obviously if he's going to untap into Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, then this is totally a very reasonable line, assuming he had nothing better to do.
Phillip, having burned through all his cantrips, just has a 4th land into play tapped. It's an Overgrown Tomb, and he has no play for the turn.
There's some interesting things going on with Zach's list. Personally, I've been playing the Aristocrats this week, and mine looks a little different. He's main decking Sorens and Obzidats, for example. We see Soren land now, and that decision's certainly working out here, as obviously Blood Artist is now, you know, a legitimate threat.
Right, now his first thing to do with Soren is he makes an emblem as opposed to making a vampire. So he's wanting to immediately swing in for 2.
Yeah, he seems to have sensed that Phillip's, you know, kind of on a weak draw. He's not really doing too much, and like I said, you know, he has to get in that incidental damage.
Right. I mean, you'd have to expect at this point, if I'm Zach, I'm expecting that there's a Thragtusk in the works here.
Right.
Because, you know, I'm assuming that Phillip kept the hand based on some sort of threat.
And we can see that you're right. It's right there. There's an Umbrella Rights and an Angel of Serenity also in his hand. I can't really see too much else.
Right, so this is like the turn 5. Now Phillip's actually started the game. He's going to start with Obzidat, the Ghost Council of Orzhova. So that will move the life totals right back. 18 and then 16 for Zach, and he's going, or 14 for Zach, and he's going to exile.
These Blood Artists are actually doing a pretty reasonable job racing that Obzidat, and Obzidat is itself not a particularly frightening card for the Aristocrat player to face. They have access to 4 Tragic Slips in the main deck, which function very disturbingly similarly to the Path to Exile or whatever in this matchup.
I mean, at this point, wouldn't Zach just be content chump blocking the Obzidat? Just because he has 2 Ghost Councils in play, it seems like that he can win a race that way.
Yeah, I think that he's going to be, making a token with his Soren, and that's going to be his plan for that. He also, would have the ability to potentially cast Lingering Souls and just chump the Obzidat that way. And because of Blood Artist, chump blocking Obzidat is actually a profitable line for Zach. He generates damage by doing it.
He's cast Falcon Wrath Aristocrat here, and thanks to the Soren emblem, is able to swing Phillip down to 11, and then makes a life-linking Vampire token with Soren. On no 5th land right now, though.
Now we see here Zach is, perilously close to actually killing Phillip.
Right.
He can, throw his whole board away at any time. Say he draws, plays a land, and goes Lingering Souls flashback or something like that. These are all things Phillip has to concern himself with. And they're things that would, mostly kill him on the spot.
Now, the Aristocrat cannot sacrifice itself, or can?
The Aristocrat can sacrifice itself, but you also, you wind up in these weird spots where, you have a Blood Artist and an Aristocrat, and you can only get damage from one of them.
The Cartel one cannot sacrifice itself,
Correct.
right?
Cartel Aristocrat is another creature.
Sure. So one of those things I'm playing that I know that, you have to be aware that the two do not work exactly the same.
It's at its most relevant against Olivia Voldaren, where Falkenrath Aristocrat can prevent itself from being stolen.
Right.
Obzat coming for Sorin. Vampire token predictably chumps. Blood Artist trigger drops Phillip down to 11.
So, and what I really like is on those chump blocks, Zach gains 3 and Phillip gets drained for 2. So the 5-point life swing on every chump block.
I'm not 100. Yeah, I was about to say I'm not 100% sure we got our Thrag Tusk in there. So it should be Phillip on 16 now.
Having lost 2 off the death trigger.
Yep.
And we'll confirm life totals here in a sec. Obzat exiles at the end of the turn, and it does. Remember, Phillip, we know, has a Restoration Angel and an Unburial Rites in hand. Is that? I mean, I know he has an Unburial Rites and a Restoration Angel in the graveyard, so at least he has access to that.
He can blink another. He can blink Thrag Tusk, and seeing if Zach has, maybe a potential a kill available.
Yeah, he has a Blasphemous Act. It appears another land. I think he also has an Obsidat in hand.
I think if he has a land and can, I don't think he has one though. If he had a land, I think he could play Obsidat and neg Storm for an emblem and then attack for lethal. I think that would be like 6.
Okay. He
7,
does
8,
have a land.
9, 10.
He has a land and a trad. Yep, he has his own Obsidat.
Yeah, he could have. I think he had lethal this turn.
Okay, so Phillip's at 16. If he'd played the Obsidat...
If he had played the Obsidat, he would have put Phillip to 14. Then he could have negged Sorin's emblem, attacked with the everything, gotten through for 6 damage
that would put him
with
down
the
to
Aristocrat,
8.
and 2 more with the Blood Artist.
Right, so that put him down to 8, right?
Yeah, and then the Blood Artist that dies getting blocked by Thrag Tusk would deal 2. He could sack Obsidat, deal another 2. Sack his Aristocrat to deal 1.
He can't sack the Aristocrat before the Blood
Not before
Artist.
damage.
Okay.
No. He'd only have 1 Blood Artist, but I think that would have been enough. And now Legend Rule, or...
Yep.
We do have... There's still an Obsidat in play, so or did he exile his Obsidat?
He exiled his own Obsidat.
Zach exiled his, okay.
Interestingly enough, Obsidat, when you have one on both sides of the table, they can coexist with each other.
Yeah, I think that play is probably fine here. It's a little awkward.
Yeah, Angel of Serenity for Phillip Robinson is going to go ahead and try to eat Zach's board.
Unless he has access to something like a Tragic Slip, I imagine he's just going to sacrifice it.
He does have a Tragic Slip. He has one in his hand. He cannot cast it right now.
Well, in that case, I probably wouldn't have played the Obsidat at all.
So the Tragic Slip is too powerful?
Yeah, the Tragic Slip is just, too important. He won't have a sacrifice outlet on the next turn in order to be able to slip, get his Aristocrat back, and play it.
Right, okay. So he's going to have to get rid of 1 Blood Artist. Now, interestingly enough, Phillip Robinson did not choose to go for both Blood Artists, which I'm curious about that play. I mean, I guess by getting rid of Aristocrat, he's playing around Tragic Slip, but I'm curious why he wouldn't just choose Aristocrat, Artist.
Yeah, I guess he's, assuming that his guy might die. Maybe he's not, factoring in the mana disadvantage that he would be creating on Zach's side. Like, obviously, killing the Vampire forever is nice, but, get a Blood Artist here. The second Blood Artist is probably effectively dead, even if Zach puts it back in his hand. Like, can he cast it again before this game ends? Seems a little unlikely.
Yeah, we have maybe 1, maybe 2 turns left in this game.
Right.
So Zach debating right now. He's having to do a fair amount of math to see whether or not he can kill on this board state, or like how many of these he wants to sacrifice. So if he sacrifices everything here, that means it drains for Blood Artist to seize himself, right? So he'd be draining for 6, putting Phillip down to 5, and then 3 on upkeep with the Obsidat.
I can see now also that I actually just did the math again in my head on that turn. Zach couldn't swing for lethal. He could actually swing Phillip down to 1.
Okay, so it's not so he didn't miss a kill.
He didn't miss a kill, unless I'm doing that math wrong again.
Okay, so interesting. Instead of sacking to put Phillip down to 5, he elects to let the Angel of Serenity get the other 2 cards.
I think his plan is to Blasphemous Act. So he needs to actually have that Blasphemous Act get him a little something once the Angel dies.
Only 5 of the damage there went at Zach. The other 5 took out the Sorin. Obsidat comes back into play, and that'll make life totals to, I believe, 15 and 7.
Yeah, that sounds right. And obviously the legend rule,
Does
the
happen.
current legend
Yes,
rule.
the current legend rule. Yeah, for about another month, that still happens.
This game would be very interesting under the new rules.
Yeah, the Obsidats could duke it out with each other.
It would actually make Zach's Blasphemous Act like way more powerful.
And then that legend rule allows him to Tragic Slip here and recast. No, those do
Whoa,
not
whoa,
go into
whoa,
play.
yeah.
It's not actually an Oblivion Ring. Those go back to his hand, unfortunately.
Yeah, where I assume he's just saying like, I'm going to cast this Aristocrat and attack you for 6, because Phillip was at 5 at
which
that
is
point.
fine. Yeah, cast Aristocrat, not actually put both of them into play. That's fine. a little sloppy, but yeah, still fine.
Alrighty.
So Krizan gets game 1.
Yep. And you really saw the power of Falconwrath Aristocrat in the matchup, which is one of the better cards by a lot.
Yeah, Reanimator is a little weak to flyers, actually. So Falconwrath Aristocrat is one of the reasons I think that the Aristocrats has a fine Junk Reanimator matchup.
And I think Phillip maybe should have exiled his Obsdat in that turn, which would have actually prevented the situation that he died to.
The Tragic Slip.
Yeah, which, I think he has to play around it there. Zach doesn't have the mana to Orzhov Charm and then replay a Falconwrath Aristocrat, so it would have definitely worked out a little better for him.
Yeah. That said, Orzhov Charm's not even a standard 4 of in the deck.
No, it's usually, 0 to 2 of. I don't think Zach is actually running any. Yeah, I don't see any in his list, so that's how he made room for his Obsidats and Sorens. He cut the Skurzak High Priest and Orzhov Charms that other players might conventionally play, such as yours truly.
Right. Yes, and it was a shortcut to casting them. To be fair, he couldn't actually cast the second Blood Artist.
Sure.
That was fine. It's still lethal, so it's still fine.
Zach's sideboard features a few interesting cards. He's got 3 Liliana the Veil and 2 Underworld Connections, which are non-standard, but he's running those. He's got what are definitely coming in for this matchup: 2 Thundermaw Hellkites and 4 Mark of Mutinies. That's some significant beatdown. He also has access to the 4th Blasphemous Act. He can bring that in, and he has a Singleton Electrickery, which I think I would probably bring in here.
So killing the mana creatures, is that important?
I think that having 1 Electrickery is fine. Like, you're going to have games where, if you drew 2, you would generally be upset because you only really need to kill 1 or all mana creatures in a given game. Right. And Electrickery, conveniently enough, has both of those modes available. But, I could see bringing in 1. He has cards that, aren't that impressive. We saw Sorim's Emblem do a little bit of work there, but I'm not super excited by Sorin just in the matchup in general.
So you mentioned 4th Blasphemous Act. So in this deck, Blasphemous Act, you'd say, is good in this matchup, correct?
Yes, it's very strong.
Is it because of the sweeper effect or because of its ability to actually work with Boros Reckoner?
It's both. It functions with Reckoner and Blood Artist as a combo kill, and it also lets you reset boards like the one that Phillip had begun to develop there that look completely unsalvageable. You can just reverse them. Suddenly, you're back in the game. You have creatures like Falconwrath Aristocrat and Cartel Aristocrat that can stick around through a Blasphemous Act. So you can go from being, pretty far behind to stable just on the back of a Blasphemous Act.
Even though Thrag Tusks get 3/3s post Blasphemous Act, it's still fine.
Well, part of the sideboard plan is these Mark of Mutinies. Zach's got 4 of them.
So then you get the 3/3.
And yeah, Mark of Mutiny taking a Thrag Tusk gets a lot of damage in, and also you sack it, turn it into a 3/3. One of the reasons I actually think the Aristocrats is such a good deck in Standard right now, and I've been playing it on Moto so much, is because it's especially strong against these Voice of Resurgence decks that are popping up for the same reason. Mark of Mutiny, a Voice of Resurgence is huge game, just very strong.
Yeah. So let's look over at Phillip Robinson's. So what are the tools then that people use against Aristocrats to beat them? We see he has access to Deathrite Shamans, then he also has a creature plan in the form of Luxon Smiter and Voice of Resurgence, and then he has a lot of extras of the cards he's already running.
Sure. I imagine he's gonna bring in probably the Voice of Resurgence. We just discussed how Mark of Mutiny is good against them, but there's still, for Phillip, he has to actually get something going. And honestly, it's a real awkward positioning matchup for Reanimator in my experience. I haven't sideboarded it from the Reanimator side, but I know I was listening to Brad and BBD argue about the matchup once where BBD decided to take Reanimator to another PTQ, and Brad was like, what's your plan for the Aristocrats matchup? And BBD just shrugged and said, I'm gonna lose. He won that PTQ.
Sure. Well, I mean, the Aristocrats is still, I feel like, despite being one of the better decks in the format, a lot of people shy away from it because on its surface it does not appear very powerful. It's not straightforward how it plays.
I think there are 2 reasons people shy away from it. One is, it doesn't appear that powerful. You've got 1/1s for 1, 0/1s for 2. These aren't cards that people are super excited to be playing with in general. Yeah. But also the deck is complex. You can pick it up, play 5 games with it, your first 5 games, and you could go 0-5 when you should be going 5-0. And that's just, you know, the deck has a steep learning curve in that regard. And if you go 0-5 with a deck, it's going to be hard to actually, you know, keep the interest in, like, yeah, I should learn this deck. This deck seems totally competitive. You're going to think, man, this deck sucks, or man, this deck's too hard. Those are like the general responses. So you'll just move off it to another deck. And I think that gets a lot of players.
Absolutely. So you'd say he'd bring in the Voice of Resurgences, but Luxodon Smiter is less of a consideration.
I think Luxodon Smiter might be okay. The problem is, you know, Phillip's beatdown plan is reasonable in the matchup, a little anemic, but reasonable. And it kind of depends on how Zach sideboards. For example, you know, if Zach starts doing stuff like trimming Tragic Slips, you know, maybe the Luxodon Smiters might look a little bit better. Lingering Soul still does a heck of a job blocking it. The only cards I really imagine we bring in, like Sever the Bloodline can function as an answer to Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, so he'll want that for sure. After seeing Obsdet out of Zach's deck, he might be inclined to bring in his own in order to avoid dying to it, because if the board stalemates, which Aristocrats is very good at creating stalemated boards thanks to Lingering Souls and Blood Artist, then Obsdet blinking in and out of play is one of the ways, you know, you can tick the opponent down into range of getting some damage done. So I think Phillip might be inclined to bring that in, bring in the Sever, you know,
and
maybe
this isn't really an Acidic Slime matchup, I would think.
I don't think it is.
It doesn't seem like Aristocrats seems like it functions just fine on a smaller number of lands. It doesn't really have any other things to Acidic Slime.
One of the other plans that you can do in the matchup is, you know, maybe go super beatdown and try and avoid the Mark of Mutiny plan. You know, you could board out your Thragtusk, board in that Slime, board in all those Smiters, and then you're just trying to make sure that Mark of Mutiny is nothing more than, you know, like kill my guy and deal me some damage, which, you know, that's still a pretty sweet card.
Yeah, that still seems like a pretty nice card in that situation.
So I imagine he'll probably just side in a few cards and try to get there that way.
Yeah, I mean, still, it seems in this matchup that Phillip's goal is still to prolong it to the late game where he starts casting Angel of Serenity.
Right, and he just has to hope that Zach can't put together a combo kill in the meantime. Keep in mind, it's very easy for the Aristocrats deck to go off in like one big turn where it just, you know, holds its hand together. It's just keeping the board with Lingering Souls and Cartel Aristocrat, and then, you know, you just spend 6 mana to play like a Boros Reckoner or a Blood Artist and cast a Blasphemous Act, and that's game.
So, interesting to see what plan we're on here. Phillip does have his turn 1 mana accelerant in the form of Avacyn's Pilgrim. He'll be able to really accelerate whatever game plan he's using. And we see...
Bam! 1 damage.
That's 1 damage. Alright, the game plan is swing for 1, play a tap land.
We see he has access to, he has another land, couple of lands.
On Zach's side, he has plenty of lands in play. He has a Boros Reckoner and a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, it looks like. He's going to start, though, with Blood Artist again.
Yeah, we saw Blood Artist do a little bit of work in the last game. It's no slouch post board either.
Yeah.
Phillip does have a Fiend Hunter. So might be pretty tempted to cast it.
Yeah, so Blood Artist is important enough that Fiend Hunting, it's worth Fiend Hunting. You don't want to save it for a Boros Reckoner.
They're actually very similar cards. The difference is Blood Artist can actually, you know, keep, like we saw last game, keep Phillip from being able to race with damage. So it's kind of a toss-up depending on what Phillip's plan is and the rest of his hand. If he has access to something like Restoration Angel, he's obviously much more likely to be willing to play the Fiend Hunter now because he can just, you know, trade it in later.
Yeah, no, it really looks like Phillip kept his hand based on the power of 5 drops. He made his 3rd land drop there and then swung with the Pilgrim and made cast no more spells that turn.
Yeah.
So once again, that'd be, you know, the read you probably have to have in this situation is that there's a lot of Thragtusks in waiting. Lingering Souls from Zach. So Lingering Souls pretty strong with Blood Artist. And really, like you said, kind of stalemating the board.
Yeah, these are the kind of board states that really let the Aristocrats player sculpt a long game. Phillip's being forced to get aggressive because otherwise those tokens are just going to eat him up. So he's going to have to, you know, play Thragtusk, start attacking. Acidic Slime in this case is it's the same difference effectively, except that Zach doesn't actually have to block this one. So he can start getting in that damage. Loses an Isolated Chapel. And he can just take 2 because Blood Artist lets him win these races.
Right.
An even race for an Aristocrats player is, in fact, a highly favorable one.
Well, so tell me more about that. You said an even race is a favorable.
Because you have cards like Blood Artist, like I found myself frequently, you know, I'm playing against mono red, maybe they lead, you know, like a Rakdos Cackler or something like that. I might just send my Cartel Aristocrats into combat, you know, declining to block. I could throw away a token and block or something like that, but I can actually afford to go down to like 8 life because I can have a big turn where I'm like Blood Artist Blasphemous Act, and all of a sudden I'm at like 14, they're at like 6, and I still have my Cartel Aristocrat.
And we're gonna see this here. Zach does replace his lost Isolated Chapel with a Boros Reckoner, and he does have a Blasphemous Act in hand. Currently, that only costs 3 mana, and it looks like with the number of creatures and with what now we have. Well, for the time being, I was going to say we had 6 creatures in play. That was threatening to deal 19. It was a lethal play next turn.
Zach setting it up very nicely. Notice I also believe he has a Plains in his hand, and he correctly held it. Didn't want to get it destroyed by Acidic Slime.
So he can cast. I don't know if it doesn't seem he has another white spell.
He doesn't
right
have another
now,
white spell.
But still good to protect
just protecting
it.
it. Yeah, it's a smart line.
And he draws Isolated Shadow.
Oh, he wouldn't have even been punished.
Yes.
What do you know?
He has Doomed Traveler, as well in hand.
Yep. Falcon Wrath Aristocrat significantly better, and obviously, we see him just taking command of this race.
So with 7 creatures in play, he's threatening the next turn swing and end the game with a Blasphemous Act.
Yeah, and note that even if the act for some reason doesn't kill Phillip, perhaps he has, there are a variety of cards. He could have something like Golgari Charm or whatever to kill the Blood Artist before everything else dies. Zach will still have a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, assuming he can get a human in play first.
And a second Fiend Hunter, this one on Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. And
we're going to let that happen.
Work. Yeah. I mean, he's still in the plan. If he swings his 2 Spirit tokens and Blasphemous Axe, that's still lethal right now. That's 2 plus the 8 creatures in play.
There are only 6 creatures.
There's 7. There's a elf down with the land.
Oh, sorry, we have an elf concealed with the land. Sure. So if he
7.
plays Doom Traveler, then the game is over.
Doom Traveler and Blasphemous
After
Axe should get this. 2 mana up. Does he? Do you realistically worry about Golgari Charm here?
No, I mean, I was just, there are a variety of cards. Orzhov Charm, would be another one. But I think you just play your Doom Traveler probably before combat and attack. If he had something like, in this case, obviously, Golgari Charm's about all he could have. That way, you're getting an extra trigger out of the Doom Traveler.
Well, he could also have an Abrupt Decay for the Blood Artist.
Sure, Abrupt Decay also.
But to be fair, even on that post-Blasphemous Act board, I mean, Zach gets back a Reckoner and a Cartel and a Reckoner. Yeah, Reckoner and an Aristocrat. So he's just going to right now. This is fun. He can just cast it because he gets back a hasted 4/1. So this should also be lethal.
Yeah, if he has a land, that's true.
Oh, that may even.
That actually plays around the Abrupt Decay. Well, it sort of plays around it in that it allows him to establish a board position.
It doesn't play around the Golgari Charm because Phillip could use Golgari Charm to regenerate his own team. But he has no such thing. That will get it. Zach Krizan, 8-0, first player into the top 8 as he defeats Phillip Robinson's Junk Reanimator deck.
And that's how Aristocrats does it in the Junk Reanimator matchup. That's why it's considered a favorable matchup.
It stalls up the board and then uses one of its game breakers.
Yeah, Reanimator, pretty vulnerable